Hello, this is journal entry for week 2. The first article that I'm talking about is Performing Masculinity, Revisioning Sexuality, Adult Internet Video Sites. So this article goes over essentially a video conferencing platform that people use on a sexual basis. So this article states that the internet has broken down strict lines between who produces sex entertainment products and those that consume them. By enacting or producing their own representations of sexuality, consumers can, to a certain extent, construct representations more closely aligned with their own self-image. One trend of interactive sex entertainment is the breakdown of the traditional binary that men look and women are looked at. This video conferencing platform allows for both. So the video conferencing platform analyzed here provides a space where men can practice displaying their bodies for women or for other men or whatever. So even though the men were on display during those video conferences, there was a notable amount of men or gender-coded behavior, such as giving instructions, posing in a way that made them look strong, or actively doing something. Often, if their genitals were on display, they would be displayed in a way that if it wasn't, trying to think of the proper word, if it wasn't ready to perform yet, that it was posed at a position to where it looked bigger, or oftentimes it wouldn't be on screen at all until they had an erection. So that kind of also just shows that even though these men were on camera as objects to be looked at, they were still attempting to have these gender-coded male behaviors or norms. In a patriarchal, heterosexist society, boys must abandon passivity to retain masculinity. But as Freud shows, what is repressed is not erased, and sexuality for many men is a site of tension and conflict. So this article noted that it was not unusual to find a group of heterosexual males sitting at their computer displaying their genitals to each other while discussing their girlfriends or computer problems. As such, this kind of establishes the nude male heterosexual and allows males to view the male nude in a narcissistic or self-reflective way rather than as a desired or as an object. So kind of comparing that to how when women are viewed in adult entertainment, they're always the ones being looked at as an object or as this thing to desire, whereas in the context of men being the ones on camera or being looked at, it's more other people looking at them or men looking at them in a self-reflective way rather than in a desired way. Generally on this website, men controlled the course of the exchange, and this platform overall, this video conferencing platform, allows for the opportunities for males to construct positions that are both the subject and object of the consuming gaze. The next article was Aligning Mars and Venus, Social Construction and Instability of Gender Differences in Romantic Relationships. So overall, this article or study aims to examine the differences between men and women in relationships. Across the 3 studies, only one stable difference emerged, which is desires regarding relational support. So I think it is kind of presumed that there are a lot more differences between men and women when it comes to relationships. The sexual strategies theory poses that women and men behave according to gender-specific sets of mating instincts that have evolved and differentiated over hundreds of thousands of years, which gave rise to the fundamental differences in the psychological dispositions of women and men and dictate mating behavior. However, this theory has been found to have many limitations, one being that it neglects to point out how gender norms and roles can be affected by things like culture. And aside from that limitation, the fact that these stereotypical ideas about gender being biologically, or gender differences in relationships being biologically derived, it can also be dangerous in terms of, categorizing people. So the study examines men and women and how they differentiate in relationships. Most theories suggest that men are from one planet and women are from another planet in terms of mating and relationship behaviors. They kind of assume that women act in this caring, nurturing, emotional way, and men are the opposite. But overall, the dimensions that were studied were a lot more alike than people thought. So the dimensions studied were sexuality, relational support, verbal behaviors, and caring actions. People tend to think that men and women vary so drastically in all of these aspects, and while there was some variance between these different ideas, most of it is to do with cultural expectations, norms, and societal factors rather than biological or evolutionary factors, and that being rooted in hundreds of thousands of years ago in our evolution. The one factor that men and women did differ on in a significant way was that women desired more relational support than men. And what I find interesting about this article and about that last point, that men and women differ significantly in desired relational support, is how I can definitely see that playing out in my own life with my boyfriend, and the fact that I think I require a little more support than he does, or maybe that's just how I see it, but I tend to be the one wanting more support in terms of when things happen in my life, or I have a bad day, or I just genuinely want to know that we're on the same page, or that we're feeling the same thing, or that I'm not overwhelming him. And then while he does need relational support and I am there for that, I don't think it's expressed as much, or perhaps that he doesn't need it as much, but I can definitely see that playing in my own life. The next article was self-naming practices on the internet. Identity, authenticity, and community. So this article examines the matching of offline to online symbolic identities or statuses such as age, gender, race, geography, and occupation. So this study analyzed these concepts within the online forum known as the Bronze, which I believe, if I'm correct, has something to do with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. From what I read in the article, that is what I'm assuming. But anyways, most people think that a lot of online behavior and communication is done so in a deceitful way, or that one is wearing a mask, or that they're enacting a lie. And while this is true and it can happen, people present parts of themselves in online communication. So from a symbolic interactionist perspective, the construction of the self process begins with a situation. The situation impacts the hierarchy of the identities. So the actor has an identity for each situation they enter. So an example used in the article was, you could use the same screen name across a variety of platforms and present quite different personas across those platforms. So it was quoted in the article that if particular interactions and interactive settings form our conduct, we have to take the realm of online interactions as no more or less symbolic than offline realm. So in other words, I kind of took that to mean, as much as someone may be seen as wearing a mask online, that it's still part of themselves in that given situation, and that online or real aspects of themselves are coming through regardless of it being online or offline. Most people on this site were actually representing their real selves in one way or another, and one example of that was the user who had the name Blade. And I mean, to me, or another person who might not be into Marvel comics, you might not understand what that is, because I wouldn't have had I not read further. But Blade was actually like an African American Marvel character, and so through using that name, he kind of identified himself as like this strong African American person. So while, yeah, they do have that screen name and they are, they kind of do have that online mask to themselves, he was still representing part of himself through that. And most people were actually representing their real selves in one way or another. The next article was Negotiating Femininities Online. So this article conducted a study through the online game Babies, which is targeted at young girls. So it's really a maternal game in nature, giving each player a virtual baby to raise and take care of. So while it does enforce these stereotypical gender roles or norms of girls being the nurturing figure, it's also important to note that it does teach girls a lot of other complex skills like coding, hexing, graphic design, networking, forming community, forming friendships, relationships, things like that. So while most of the girls playing the games do conform to the norms and expectations of the game to be played how it was intended to be, there are a few that did take a more drastic and cynical or subversive approach to it and ended up actually abusing the babies or requesting photos of abused babies or whatever it may be. So while some girls did in fact play the game how it was intended, some kind of took it in a different route, not conforming to these roles. But although while they were not conforming to these roles by enacting abuse, we'll see later that they were still attempting to build community and relationships, which most girls attempt to do. So this game shows from a young age that these girls are taught skills that are important to girls, such as networking, forming community. The girls interact with each other by asking advice, asking for babysitting, job postings, things like that. And what that shows is that, women or girls do that in real life, like a lot of Facebook groups or things like that. Women are constantly trying to connect with one another and form relationships and form community. For example, I'm a part of a group on Facebook called Oakley Moms and Friends, Oakley Hyde Park Moms and Friends. And it's basically a group of just I don't even know how many thousand people in the area, and you can reach out to them for anything, whether it be motherly advice. I don't have kids, but a lot of the people in the group don't have kids either, or just advice on where to look for an apartment, good places to eat, good places for date night, things like that. So it's really just women coming together to form a community, kind of like this game. This allows girls to connect with one another in a way that women do in the real world, building friendships and relationships with one another. They are also taught to collaborate with others, interact with others from different cultures, and as a result, they have enhanced skills, linguistic skills, and language skills. The girls using the site use the web as an arena to explore identities, confide, confess, and challenge using a whole range of discourses. So even though there are those who abuse the virtual babies, they are still attempting to connect with others and form a community. So the one post that was examined in the article was discussing a girl who was asking people to send in their abused babies. I don't know exactly, but she wanted them to send in proof of their abused babies. But even within that context of rebelling, she was still attempting to form community with those other abusers or other people in that community. So while she was rebelling, she was also still trying to form relationships. And the next article is Assessing Gender Authenticity in Computer-Mediated Language Use, Evidence from an Identity Game. So this research study analyzed an identity game where people would guess the gender of a given player. There are judges, moderators, and players involved in these games. The contestants are asked questions hoping to elude others to the identity of their gender. So they could be a male posing as a male posing as a female posing as a male, or female posing as female. The overall conclusion from this study is that the contestants produce stereotypical content when attempting to pass as the opposite gender. And the stereotypical content isn't always persuasive or effective. Oftentimes it does the opposite. So if someone is coming across as too stereotypical male or female, they often aren't believed because of the strong stereotypes they are enacting. The notion that gender is a performance, something that one does rather than something one is, can be traced back to Birdwhistle's concept of masculinity and femininity as display. Scholars have said that males and females tend to use language in different ways, presumably unconsciously, online as well as offline as well as online. So while they are attempting to portray one gender, they may unconsciously be using gender discourse styles that can reveal one's true gender even when they are performing another. So in other words, when participants form gender through choosing to display this stereotypical content, they may be producing, what they think to be the stereotypical male or female, but deeply rooted are those stylistic features at the word and sentence level that remain largely true to their real life genders. So while they are attempting to portray one gender, intrinsically and unconsciously they are portraying their true selves, and oftentimes those stereotypes that they're enacting in terms of the stereotypical male or female are overdone so in a sense that it isn't convincing. So that is the end of week 2 journal entry.